Well, look, I think the U.S. should be taking every step possible to end this regime. The Ayatollah Khamenei hates America. He regularly leads massive mobs chanting death to America. In fact, every year in Iran, they celebrate as a holiday Death to America Day. It's the anniversary of the Iranian Revolution.
Let's talk about what's happening in Iran and the US's response. The Trump administration's response has been praised and criticised. It's clear that Donald Trump is backing the protesters, but after he warned the Iranian regime not to kill innocent, peaceful protesters, he hasn't done anything when that has happened. And there's been fairly extensive evidence now of a very horrific crackdown on protesters, reports of thousands being killed. We've seen further sanctions by the US, but no military action. John, how do you see the White House's response to what's happening in Iran?
Well, Rita, it does seem that Trump has backed off in recent days, and I think that probably reflects the fact that it is hard to have a lot of influence if you aren't willing to put soldiers in the field. Now the mullahs have shut off communications, they've shut down the internet and so forth. They apparently have gone on killing thousands of people. They obviously need to go, but whether President Trump is willing to do anything further to get rid of them remains to be seen.
It's also interesting that we've not heard much from Russian President Vladimir Putin. He's been unusually quiet throughout the last couple of weeks with the uprising, same with China. And Jamie Siddle writes in news.com that there's a new player on the block, US President Donald Trump. He's unpredictable, he's brash, he's upending every expectation, and that's unbalancing every global axis. Now, do you agree that that is in part why the Ayatollah's regime is on the brink of collapse? And can that collapse happen independent of some sort of assistance from the US?
Rita, there's no doubt that Trump's encouragement has helped to spur on these protests, which we all fervently hope will bring this horrible Iranian regime finally to an end. But one thing we've seen historically, Rita, is that tyrannical regimes can hang on for a long time after they're seemingly dead in the water. Cuba is a good example of that, a totally discredited government, but still there after 85 years. And so we hope that these public protests and so forth will bring down the mullah's regime. But at this point, we really don't know. We've got to wait and see.
Joining me is the country's top foreign affairs writer, Greg Sheridan of The Australian. Greg, great to see you again. I'm grateful to you for coming on the show as a regular again this year. Very much value your contributions. Iran, how serious are these protests?
Well, Andrew, great to be with you and welcome back. Look, these protests, I think, were the most serious challenge the Iranian government has faced since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. I think 16,500 dead civilians is a very modest estimate. I've got good reasons with pretty good sources for thinking the number of dead is very strongly in excess of that. However, and as you rightly comment, no demonstrators on the streets about it except ethnic Iranians and some sympathetic Jewish Australians. Even worse, the killings in Sudan in the civil war there. 150,000 dead at about the same time as the Israel-Hamas hostilities. Not a peep out of the left about that. However, the depressing thing is that the regime has held together pretty well. There have been no real cracks in the regime, no defections. Even people identified as moderates within the Iranian regime are backing the crackdown. No troops have refused to fire on their citizens. Dictatorships tend to fall when they liberalise or when there's conflict within the elite. At this stage, there's neither of those things. Donald Trump may strike them and that might hurt them, but on the other hand, he didn't strike them at the height of the demonstrations. He may do more stuff with sanctions that might hurt them, but so far there's no real sign that they're cracking up.
Well, that's depressing news for all those hopeful young Iranians in the streets of Sydney who are thinking, at least for the first time in their young lives, maybe there was some reform and freedom in Iran. But there you go. Donald Trump is busy with another country, is up this campaign to take Greenland from Denmark without ruling out four Syrias.
Greenland is very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. You know, I can't rely on Denmark being able to fend themselves off. You know, they were talking about they put an extra dog, and they were serious about this. They put an extra dog sled there last month. They added a second dog sled. That's not going to do the trick.
Now, Greg, Trump has now said it's going to impose 25% tariffs on the 7 European countries that last week promised to send soldiers to Greenland in support of Denmark, including France, Germany and Britain, which, by the way, sent only one soldier. Why is Trump pushing this so hard, and will he get Greenland in the end?
Well, Andrew, you know, one thing I admire about your journalism is that you tell the truth about Trump when he does good things and when he does bad things. I try in my very limited way to do the same. Recently, I praised him a lot over his actions on Gaza and Iran and even Venezuela. But in this Greenland business, he has no justification for what he's doing at all. Not a speck of justification. So Greenland is a huge territory, huge territory, much, much bigger than France. As the ice is melting a bit, there may be access to its mineral resources. As the ice is melting a bit, the seaways around the Arctic and near Greenland may become more navigable, and both Russians and Chinese are appearing there. The United States already has a military base in Greenland and would be welcome by both the Danes and the Greenlanders to establish as many military bases as it wanted. What Trump says is simply completely barking mad. The idea that Russia or China could occupy Greenland and that there's nothing that NATO could do about it. You know, Russia and China would both be operating a long way away from home, and the United States would be there to do something about it as a NATO ally. For Trump to simply decide that he wants to take this great big chunk of territory, it can't be just for security reasons, because he could do anything he wanted to in security terms right now. Presumably it's partly for mineral reasons, but I think it's really tied up with the dark side of the Trump personality, narcissistic personality disorder and egomania. He thinks that, like the Louisiana Purchase or, the Seward Purchase of Alaska in the 19th century, that he can go down in history as someone who greatly enlarged American territory. But the consequences would be diabolical. Invading the territory of a NATO ally, I don't think in the end even Trump will be mad enough to do it, and I think even cowed Republicans would rebel furiously in Congress if he tried to do it. So Trump, sometimes he's better than any other American president you could imagine, and sometimes he's worse than any other American president you could imagine.
I have no reason to believe that he would invade Greenland. I think it's a typical Trump bluster to get people to the negotiating table and give him what he really wants. And I think just keep your eye on that. That's typical Trump tactic. We shall see. If he just bought the place, he could offer Greenlanders $1 million every man, woman and child and get the whole island for $57 billion, and that would be a bargain. Greg Sheridan, thank you so much for your time.